Good morning, King community. As we continue our work in equity and ensuring a safe and educational environment for racial minority groups, we are excited to kick off Asian American and Pacific Islander AAPI Heritage Month. AAPI Month is celebrated nationally in May. It honors the rich history, diverse cultures, and achievements of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who have enhanced America's history and are instrumental in its future success. Today, we want to bring attention and awareness of AAPI Month and our community. With the rise of anti-Asian sentiment throughout the country, it's especially significant that we honor and celebrate our community to let our AAPI students know that we at LDUB see you, we hear you, and we support you.
The Stop AAPI Hate organization published a 2020 to 2021 National Report and Youth Incident Report, which included 341 reports of anti-Asian discrimination involving youth nationally from March 19, 2020 to July 22, 2020. These cases make up 16% of all self-reported hate incidents to stop AAPI hate during the COVID pandemic. The report lists the types of discrimination with 78 youth. Over 8 out of 10 reported being bullied or verbally harassed. 82 youth, or 1 out of 4, faced shunning and social isolation, and 24 physical assaults of youth. Youth were more likely than adults to be harassed at school, public parks, and online. Girls were 2.5 times more likely to report hate incidents than boys. In over half of these cases, perpetrators employed anti-Chinese hate speech, including blaming China and the Chinese as the source of the virus and mocking Chinese dietary habits. Adults were present in half of the incidents, but in only 10% of the cases did bystanders intervene.
It is very important to understand who makes up the AAPI community. The Asian Pacific Institute states that the AAPI includes all people of Asian, Asian American, or Pacific Islander ancestry who trace their origins to the countries, states, jurisdictions, and/or diaspora communities of these geographic regions. AAPI makes up a little more than 4 billion people. Asians are people with origins in any of the original peoples of the Far East, Southeast Asian, or the Indian subcontinent. East Asian is a person of Chinese, Taiwanese, Japanese, Korean, and Mongolian descent. South Asian is a person of Indian, Bangladesh, Sri Lankan, Nepal, and Pakistani backgrounds. Southeast Asian is a person of Filipino, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Lao, Indonesian, Thai, or Singaporean descent. Central Asian is a person with origins in the original peoples of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. West Asian is a person with origins in the original peoples of Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Cyprus, Georgia, Iraq,
Iran,
Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. Pacific Islanders are people whose origin belongs to the Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. This includes, but not limited to, Native Hawaiian, Samoan, Tahitian, Guamanian, Fijian, and Papua New Guinean people.
At Lake Washington High School, we have a growing AAPI community with 284 Asian and 2 Pacific Islander students enrolled. With the growing community in mind, the AAPI Coalition was established this year at LDUB. It's a new club for students to engage in casual discussions and interactive activities to learn about the diverse range of AAPI cultures. If you would like to learn more about our AAPI Coalition, there's information in the video with who to reach out to. In addition to celebrating and honoring our AAPI community, AAPI Heritage Month is also an opportunity to bring awareness and education to the discrimination and racism that many in the AAPI community experienced even before the pandemic started. The model minority myth, the belief that Asian Americans have made it despite obstacles, was originated in the 1960s During the rise of social movements addressing the U.S. war in Vietnam, the environment, and racial and gender equality. The model minority myth is dangerous to the AAPI community as it's perceived as better than other minoritized groups, which therefore means that AAPI do not face racism and don't need anti-racist support. Please watch this video to learn more about the model minority myth.
It's basically that there's this group of people who have come here and sort of really quickly and automatically achieved the American dream.
That Asians are wealthy or highly educated as a whole.
Asian Americans, no matter what generation you belong to, you are a conformist and you are going to play by the rules.
Study hard, work hard, not have fun. You know, you either work in IT or you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or an engineer.
Many Americans think of Asians as a quote-unquote model minority, but there are tons of misconceptions about where that stereotype comes from and just how true it is.
Asians have a long history in the United States. They were miners during the California Gold Rush. They helped build the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s. Back then, there was a lot of resentment toward Asian Americans, who were often portrayed as job stealers and dangerous criminals. This intense racism spurred laws that made the Chinese the first nationality to be banned from emigrating to the United States. During World War II, anti-Asian racism was one reason people clamored to send Japanese Americans to internment camps. But after the war, something remarkable happened. Asian Americans began to be seen as a model minority, an uncomplaining, hard-working group that exemplified the American dream. How did the image of Asian Americans change so drastically? According to historian Ellen Wu, who has studied the history of racism toward Asian Americans, some of the model minority stereotypes began with Asian American leaders who wanted to promote positive images of their communities. For instance, during the 1950s, America was in the middle of a panic about youth delinquency. Think James Dean and Switchblade gangs. Sensing those anxieties, some Chinese American leaders spread stories about their obedient children and traditional Confucian family values. But these efforts were quickly co-opted by some in the political mainstream. At a time when the United States was fighting to establish itself as the leader of the free world, the State Department broadcast stories of happy and Americanized Chinese American families to win foreign allies.
We send the message in over 40 languages, using natives of the country to which they broadcast. Most of these are now American citizens.
We show them us Buddha-heads, good soldiers, good Americans.
That's the idea. I hope it works.
Japanese Americans were another example of how geopolitics and racial politics collided during this time. After the War Relocation Authority encouraged Japanese Americans to put the memory of the internment camps behind them. The agency resettled many of them across the country in hopes that they would assimilate more deeply. The government commissioned photos and videos of wholesome, patriotic Japanese American workers and families. Many saw these images of Japanese American upward progress as a symbol of Cold War American values. According to Ellen Wu, not all Japanese Americans agreed with how they were portrayed, but some welcomed this as a chance for their communities to achieve upward mobility.
A short time ago, they were in a relocation center. Now they're in the Middle West, renewing their touch with the world they left a year earlier.
Parts of the mainstream media latched onto these images, amplifying stories about Asian Americans being accepted into American culture.
And I'm planning to marry a Japanese girl myself.
I am happy to be both Chinese and American.
But not all Asian Americans were as successful as they were often portrayed. And the actors portraying them in the movies sometimes weren't even Asian.
I like that. Chop suey, chop suey.
By the 1960s, the model minority myth took a darker turn. As Ellen Wu has documented, Asian American stereotypes began to be used against African American demands for social and economic justice. Stories of Asian success influenced the controversial Moynihan Report, which blamed black poverty on ghetto culture. In some newspapers, opinion columnists unfairly asked if Asians could do it, why couldn't African Americans?
The Asian model minority stereotype still survives today. only now it's become something of a straitjacket for the community.
When I talk to non-Asian Americans, they say, well, the model minority stereotype, that's not a bad thing, right? It's really a compliment. You guys are such high achievers. Where I see it as a problem and as a negative is when this stereotype is really detrimental and really prohibitive from getting Asian Americans getting help, whether it's mental health care or getting involved in the political, activist arena that they really want to.
If I'm in an airport, I'm already in the Muslim basket. If I'm walking down the street, then there's this other game of when I'm approaching someone, what are they thinking of me first? Are they gonna treat me like they would treat anybody else? Oh no, I just want to be treated like a normal human being.
The more we have Asian personalities being represented in media and in public office and in areas of power and influence, the more this stereotype can get broken down and the reality of who we are as individuals can be presented.
We are grateful to have had the opportunity through Homeroom to begin sharing about the importance of the AAPI community, including those within our own Kang walls. Throughout the next few homerooms, we will dive more deeply into AAPI history and hear from some of our own AAPI students and staff. We know that we won't be able to cover everything, but please know that there are resources available to you if you'd like to learn more beyond what we're able to cover during homerooms. And of course, happy AAPI Heritage Month. Bye, everybody.